right, welcome everybody to the first Eternal After Show. How's everybody doing? We appreciate coming in and hanging out with us after the event, but I'm not going to waste any time. First off, congratulations to the Boxer on your huge win. Congrats, buddy.
You.
How's it going? How's it
Congrats,
feel?
Boxer.
Feels great. It's like unreal. I have Eternal open on the bracket tab, just making sure I don't have to play another game. And like
the secret final match versus BK on Bell's Revolt.
Yeah, bonus match. Well, we really appreciate you coming on. I know you're exhausted. I know you're probably super tired after playing a long day, but thank you so much for coming on and spending a couple minutes with us. So first off, we're going to go through some deck techs later, but why don't you give us your first, what made you choose the deck? How do you like the deck? What do you think of it?
So about a week ago, Lights Out Ace, current world champion, posted this even found list in our TRS Discord, and I started playing and I was like, I really like this deck. I hope this is a deck I can justify playing because I love Golem, if you can't tell. And I like grindy shadow mid-range decks. So like I kept testing it. And then Jazz, Notorious GHP, Shy City Shogun, Popotito, Captain Timber. I'm sorry if I'm blanking on any of my. I'm
no worries.
Tired, but yeah, my teammates helped tune this, and they added Vara and Grenahen in, and I was like, I don't know if I like those here.
Mm-hmm.
I like Forbidden Research, and then I was like, okay, Jez and Notorious GHP are both math people as well. I'm just gonna take whatever 80 they tell me to.
Well, it's a good plan, absolutely. All right, you faced a mirror there in the finals. So I want to talk a little bit about the mirror match. Did you face a lot of mirrors today throughout the top 64, or was that the only one?
I believe I faced another one against RNG. I think that was it, though, just 2 mirrors.
Okay. And what do you think? What's
RNG,
the key of that matchup?
Yeah,
we'll go over that play later. RNG's ace space there, but yeah, talk to us a little bit about the mirror match.
So the mirror is one of the few places I don't like having a full 4 Rindra. I think it's a powerful card. You know, it's a 2-for-1 and it stabilizes. Where Vara is like sometimes a 1.5-for-1 that stabilizes kind of well. Like Vara is objectively a less powerful card than Rindra, but if the mirror is running rampant, you don't want to be making your opponent discard. That was kind of the key. Yeah, as you saw against RNG, the Fell Rocks are kind of crazy. They just keep going back and forth and back and forth. And so I wanted to avoid that. I also noticed that Netscape Navigator didn't have any Annihilate, which is a card a lot of lists run. I can see not running. You know, Defile hits cards from, you know, a lot of, like, Kira and Shrine are both decks that it hits a lot in. The Void Hate is useful, but only for Annihilate. So I was like, okay, my Varas are a bit safer, and I planned around being able to stop the Aegis on Champion by playing a Vara into it the turn before. And Champion is one of the key cards of the matchup. It can just end the game on its own. It's really hard to kill. You can't just kill it with one removal spell. Like Ikaria hits it if the Aegis is gone. Mavaleft Huntress hits it if the regen is gone, but it's just a nightmare if it goes unchecked.
All right, so this deck, now I know things are switching a little bit, probably switching to Expedition for the next couple weeks, but is this the type of deck that someone can just take from Eternal Warcry and start jamming on ladder? Is this going to be a good ladder deck, or do you think it's specifically tuned for a tournament atmosphere?
People can have success with it on ladder. One thing that you need to practice a lot is knowing when to redraw with it. Like that gets a little easier in tournaments, but it's still, there's a lot of awkward hands where you're like, oh, is a removal spell on 2 enough? I want some kind of unit, because a lot of matchups you just want to be running out units and playing removal later. You know, sometimes you'll have a Fell Rock in your hand. There's less ways in this version to discard Fell Rock from your hand than a lot of lists. So it can get stranded for a bit. You might have to plunder. Oh yeah, plundering is another thing you'll need to practice. You have to plunder a lot for power in this deck, because it's really not running as much power as you'd think a deck that plays a lot of 6-drops would need.
I think your redraw in game 2 of the finals, even though you ended up losing that game, was very disciplined, and like a clear sign of, well, what I think you do best, which is make plays that feel bad or like, are not appealing, but are generally going to actually help you win, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm like always trying to like I hate redrawing. I play these decks, but like that have golems. Like I love card advantage, so going down to 6 and is not my favorite thing, but it's something I'm practicing.
Talk about the market real quick. So you have the Silverblade Menace in the market. No worries, Stormblessed. We'll get to your question. 1 sec. You have that Silverblade Menace in the market. That came up a couple times. We saw that on coverage come up a couple times. Talk to us about that market slot and that card in particular.
So that is mainly for against Elysian and heavy control. It's good in the mirror sometimes if it goes on really long. It's kind of a go over the top of other mid-rangey and control decks, but more bordering on control because champion is often the first pick in the mirror. It's also just a card that sometimes wins games and matchups you're not planning for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Stormblessed.
Obviously you won, right? So it's like, like I won, I don't care. But like, if you were to make a change to the deck, like what would any of the numbers? Would you increase Cantha, decrease Damar, increase something else, add a different card into the deck? Is there any thoughts you'd change for after you've had this experience of both the Swiss rounds and then the single elimination rounds? Are there any improvements you'd make to the deck, or not necessarily improvements, but like any cards you'd want to consider adding or changing?
I did not like the Blight Moth in the market. It's just too slow. And I was halfway to getting rid of it. You can tell me you told me so, Lights Out Ace. And like if you're against aggro, the Grafter Body is like, if the Grafter Body isn't enough and the game's going on long, you'll have other stuff to do. So you should put cards in your market for for matchups that you plan to go long. And so putting in this card that you have to pay 3 to get out of your market with Grafter for Yetis is like not a good idea. It's kind of hedging your bets in a bad way. Other cards that I didn't like, I wasn't exactly sure on the removal spell split. Annihilate was better than I thought it would be, but Defile was also, I guess I can't recommend cutting down on Defile because Kira is a very good deck that you just lose to have Dovids unanswered. You might want to add more Dazzles if the mirror is popular, because countering an honor or negating an honor or a research is big.
Okay.
I might want to cut the
mirror will
shadow
definitely
symbol
be popular
because it just wasn't worth it. Oh, no worries. It speeds up a Kantha, but undepleted power is important.
Yeah. Okay. Netscape Navigator, your opponent there in the finals in the chat asks, they wish they had a Nullblade in the market. Did your team consider having a Nullblade?
So we had Nullblade for a while. It was in the original list. We cut it because it's good against Reanimator, but like you don't want to be playing this forecast removal spell in a lot of other matchups, and I think Control is good enough matchup, and you have other cards for it. It's great against Felrock. I'll give you that. I haven't thought exactly if it's useful enough to sometimes skip on getting Champion first to get Nullblade, but in testing, it did hurt me a lot when my opponent would just play a Nullblade on ladder, and I just stare at my cards and don't know what I was supposed to do.
Yeah. Also, as far as Nullblade goes in the current metagame, it's like okay versus Kira, but not great. And you might think that it's good versus like FPS Shrine, but it is a lot worse than you think it is because while the deck does play Crawl, and one of the big things it does, especially with no one to hold them in Trove, is have a lot of access to Crawl. It also doesn't need to play the Crawl game to win. It just plays a regular Shrine game. It doesn't really use the Void as much as you think it might for a deck built around the Void and sacrificing things. So it's not like it's particularly powerful there, although it is good, especially because taking out all the merchants in the Void is really powerful because one of the powerful things, and we'll get to this later talking about the FPS deck, is you put merchant in the Void and then you can know when to Crawl them and pull merchant out, and then you've played one cost for not only for market effect, but also for a unit on the board, especially with a shrine that you can get on the market that way. So there is some benefit to taking out the merchants, but also the deck can do a lot of other things, so it's not reanimated where you need the void.
Also, I want to point out, if you want to beat Feln, play the Shrine deck, or Kola's Reanimator deck. Those are both matchups I really wanted to avoid.
Yeah, the shrine, it looked like a tough matchup, but yeah, that's a good point. Another question for you from chat. Someone says, I think you favor Vara Vengeance Seeker, then Vara Fate Touched. Why did you put no Vara Fate Touch in your deck? Was the question.
So it's a powerful over-the-top card that if you're trying to win the mirror and you think champions will be answered reasonably often, or like stopped with negate, not negate, exploit, then I could see it, but it also costs 8, and you have a lot of plunder, so extra power can be turned into troves, or discarded to Honor of Claws. It is really a lot. That's my feeling on that card.
Okay, great. Any other questions in chat, or any other questions, Sunny and Stormblessed?
Yeah, I've got one. So I've heard over the weekend a few times that I think Notoria saying that you thought that the best deck was the Menace Shrine deck, but you couldn't get enough reps in or get the right version down. Knowing the result of today, would you still recommend that to your teammates? Do you still hold that belief?
Oh yeah, I think it's still a good deck. There's room to be tuned. I really didn't like how I saw a lot of 3s next to Kato's. That's my advice for Shrine players: play 4 Kato. If you had asked me before the tournament, I thought like Shrine would probably take this down. Occultist and Grenahan are both great cards. Yeah, I don't have many reps on Shrine decks. That's part of what made me steer away. Like, I don't think we had a good version yet. But I also, despite playing Sacrifice a lot, it's always grindier ones that I play and not Shrine. So I have a horrible win rate on ladder with Shrine. Like, I'm sure it's like around 30%. But I think the deck is good.
Well, we'll get this a bit later, but the FPS deck it's very unique as far as Sacrifice goes, because it does, depending on your variant, of course, there's a lot of unique plays compared to the old Sacrifice decks, especially in regards to Shrine, right? A lot of Sacrifice decks in the past played Shrine main deck, or like had clunky Shrine access, where FPS is very unique in this regard. With no one to hold them in Krill, it plays a very different game.
Yep. All right. Well, Boxer, I'm going to let you go. I know you're super tired, so congratulations again. Fantastic performance today. Where can people find you? Where do we want to share before you head out?
So I'm at the Boxer ECG on Twitter, and I'm a co-host of the Backlash podcast. You can find basically anywhere podcasts are.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you so much, The Boxer, for coming on and joining us. We really appreciate it, and congratulations again. And now I guess you can rest and hang out until Worlds. No more pressure on you. That's got to feel good. All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just incredible. Just the high from my head is spinning.
Absolutely. All right. Well, go get some rest. Probably need to eat and drink something as well. But thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it, Boxer. Have a great one.
Congratulations again.
Bye, Boxer.
Bye.
All right, let's get Sunyveil back in here. All right, Sunny, we got you on there. So that was great that the Boxer was able to join us. Thank you, everybody, for coming in and hanging out with us for this after show. That was great questions in the chat. If you all have more questions, you want us to look over anything, please feel free to do so. We're going to dive into some deck lists here. I have real quick before we do that, I want to pull up this schedule for the spring season. Just a reminder, if you're not aware of Tuesday Night Eternal series, this series is going to grant 2 invites to Worlds to go and play along the Boxer. Our next big open, the Expedition Open, I believe is mid-April. I think it's between challenges 6 and 7 there. But if you haven't heard of this or you want to qualify for Worlds as well, here are the upcoming challenges. Our next one is this coming Tuesday, March 30th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and that will be an Expedition tournament. All right, Sunny, you're up first. Which deck list do you want to go over? You want to give us, you want to go over that one? You want to go over the winning deck?
Let's go over the deck that is getting a lot of people, has a lot of people arguing, and that is the Sling deck that came into 4th place. And oh man, I thought we were so close to seeing that just stomp over the semifinals and the finals.
All right, let's pull that one
so
up. Go ahead.
So people have mentioned, I mean, the Boxer mentioned that the Menace deck might be really good against Felm, but I want to point out there were, I believe, 15 even Felm decks and 15 Menace decks at the beginning of day one. I might have the number wrong. I remember it was the same amount. There were 9 Felm decks in the top 16 and two Menace decks in the top 16 and none in the top 8. So that tells you a little bit of how well positioned I think that Menace deck is. This Sling deck, on the other hand, when it got slinged down, it seemed basically invincible against that Felm deck that obviously was the tail of the day, putting 2 copies in the top 8. 2 copies in the finals.
Yep.
And as the gameplay pattern was pretty straightforward, they would get face ages, they'd play Sling, they'd play something that had 6 attack, and the Felm deck just couldn't put enough pressure on for the most part, and couldn't remove the Sling, and they would just grind out their opponents that way. And Rost also is just something that's a nightmare for them. So I mean, I think if you want to beat even Felm, especially with the result of this tournament, I think this is one of your best choices, because it seems so hard for the even Felm deck to interact. And I mean, it came down to some really tight plays at the end of that semifinal for Felm to be able to beat it and face a mirror match in the finals.
Yeah, absolutely. Question that either one of you can take. Advice for upping your game when hitting a mental block. We're going to jump around from questions to topics, so I'm just going to interject with questions as we go through it. So as we see questions, Sunny, advice for menting your upper game when hitting a mental block.
Record yourself playing, play your hardest, and look back at the video and see anything you could do differently. Also share it around to people to see what they would do differently. I think that it's also helpful to like play on a call with someone, just have multiple people on a call playing the same game basically. But you will notice so much more when you're out of the moment and you're looking back at it.
Yeah, good answer.
Yeah, I think also kind of depends on what you mean by mental block. Like what because there's a variety of different mental blocks. It could just be as simple as step away from the game, come back to it later once you're no longer tilted. If you find yourself going down a down spiral of negative thoughts, just step away. That's always a good possibility. Another way is just use math and stats, use like the hypergeometric calculator to find out how unlucky you were, or maybe 10 games in a row that I all this unlucky, or maybe you look back on it and it's like, oh wait, no, this actually had like a 20% chance to happen. And if you played enough turn-based strategies, 20% equals 20%. It's not guaranteed by any stretch. So I like to try to look at it more objectively rather than with feelings are important, but also try to look at it with new eyes, basically a different perspective, and I think that can help out too.
If you're not a math person, become friends with someone that is a math person, because like knowledge of statistics is incredibly helpful to settle a lot of arguments basically.
Yep. How many hits did you have for Grenahead in your deck? Well, the math says that if you have, around 40, you have about a 90% chance to hit a card. If you have around 30, you have an 80% chance to hit a card. So what do you want? Do you want 80% chance or 90% chance? And if, based on whatever you want, then you put that number of hits in your deck.
All right, back to this Sling deck real quick. So, interestingly, if you all remember, Sling actually won our first challenge, the Spring Challenge #1, the first Throne Challenge of the season. Sling kind of surprised everybody and won that tournament, performed really well against a lot of the Elysian decks, and then on Tuesday night, following the weekend, didn't really perform super well, and so it was sort of a flash in the pan. Is this deck actually competitive viable? But maybe not. And then here it is again. It's back.
The deck is bad.
So what's the thought here? Is this deck good? Is it not good? What's the deal?
The deck is inconsistently very powerful. If a deck is inconsistently very powerful, it can do well at a tournament, but it can't do well, so quote unquote consistently. If you took the same number of people that brought even Feln as the same number of people that brought Sling, you'd find that there would be a lot more even Feln players that converted to day 2. Because the deck is more consistently powerful.
And then one last thing I wanted to touch on this deck. So something we didn't see in the challenge winning deck a couple weeks ago, we saw that build had a lot of 6 attack units to trigger the front half of Sling. But we saw a lot today. The Tamaris Earthshaker, which I guess they only have 3 copies of, not 4, but I feel like we saw it every game on camera. But that was actually really interesting. Playing that out, shifting that out after a Sling to just start generating card advantage was something we haven't seen from Sling decks in the past. I thought that was a really interesting take on that.
Well, the Felon deck kills very slowly, and so and they can't deal with a shifted Tamaris plus a Sling, right? It's just that they can't interact with what the Sling is presenting very well, and I think that's what makes it such a good matchup. Even if it does have, as Stormblessed mentioned, glaring holes elsewhere in its game. Like, I think if you played against, the other thing is that the second Tuesday Night Eternal was dominated by Huru Cure, right? Top three spot.
Yep.
And I think that's a dreadful matchup for Sling, having been on the other side of that a lot. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, like, if the field is really heavy on even Felon, I think it's a great deck. But if you're expecting more of a wide range of decks, then maybe not so much.
All right, good answer.
And if you're bad at top deck, if you're bad at getting a turn 3 Sling, that's also it's good. It's good when you have turn 3 Sling.
Practice your ability to flip turn 3 Slings. All right, Stormblessed, you're up. What deck would you want to look at?
I mean, there's both. So the interesting thing is, I'd like to look at one of these FPS decks.
All right.
So many different ones, right?
Yeah, there are a lot of different ones.
Even though they're all FPS, there's really 2 main variants, I would say, with even still within the number variation.
You want to look at Apple Chips' version?
Sure. Well, we'll look at Apple Chips right now. Yeah. Apple Chips is good.
All right, give me 1 second on that one. Pull that up.
Should we answer this question while...
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so Chaos Lords asks, what's one piloting or deck building principle you wish people spent more time learning? I mean, I don't know if this is... Well, I guess it is. But I wish people would understand where the game is tipping. Like, understanding why you lose is surprisingly difficult. Like, a lot of people think if they lose to what actually hits them for lethal, or like a threat that they can't deal with that comes in the late game, whereas the tipping point of the game is much earlier. And I think once you can do that, you can learn from your own games a lot better.
So apparently Discord, I'm on a mobile device right now, but apparently Discord is not liking being run at the same time as me trying to look at just. But I'll go from memory, since I faced Apple Chips in the top 16, mm-hmm. And I obviously had to look at that deck very carefully and closely. And I'll get to that in a second when I talk more about it. So basically, the deck it's a sacrifice deck. You're playing Carver. You have the Carver engine where you're carving things up, and you're playing things with Carver. It's also playing the Whispering Wind package, which is to say Whispering Wind and Krull, and not Jotun Hurler. So if Whispering Wind attacks, discards any 3-cost unit, you are guaranteed to, or Trove perhaps, you are guaranteed to draw a Krull, which can get back any unit from your void, as long as you have power open, including that 3-cost unit discard, including making a free Crafty Occultist or a free Merchant, and that's obviously exceptionally powerful. The deck also plays a bunch of Grenadin drones, plays a bunch of Katos, Mother of Skies for extra value. So this deck's sort of like a hybrid between the 2 other variants, and the space it creates is with sacrificing Jotun Hurler. Personally, I like the Jotun Hurlers over the Whispering Winds because I think Jotun Hurler is an exceptional card and also really good off of knowing to hold them. But it's also defensible to go the other way. This deck has perhaps more power and more power in some respects, although it's more vulnerable because Whispering Wind is a 1/2 that can get silenced or killed very easily. So one of the powerful engines of a deck is Praxis Trove. If you play Praxis Trove and then play a 1-cost unit, and you have a unit in your void, which is very likely considering the rest of the deck, if you have any units in your void, you play a 1-cost unit, then you grab No One to Hold Them for free, since it's the only spell in the deck that costs 1. With No One to Hold Them, you grab Broken Contract. Broken Contract plays a 4/1 soldier that can't block. That 4/1 soldier costs 2, which means that you can then immediately play Devour and sacrifice presumably your 1-cost unit to draw another 2 cards. So that way you basically are skipping right to 3, drawing a bunch of cards, putting cards in hand for merchants, etc., and getting a powerful engine on that way. And once you go to 3, then you can play either Crafty or Merchant, and that will give you a Display of Menace for free. Display of Menace is exceptionally powerful right now. For one thing, it kills Sling of the Chi, which is a common card, but also it has good combinations with not in this deck, but in other versions of the deck they're playing Howling Peak Smuggler, you can then deal 2 to everything, which can kill, say, like Lord Steyer's tower. With 1, it can still deal with a lot of Kira units because you're dealing 1 to everything. It also is good in the mirror because everything has 1 health in the mirror. So, there's a lot of power that way. So Praxis Trove gives you a lot of value that way, as well as, just sacrificing a unit to draw 2 of 4, which is a really powerful move, especially when you can combine that with Sling to get your sacrifice effect out. So the deck has a lot of really interesting lines where you're carving, and you should probably carve Smuggler. It sounds weird, but you should carve the better unit because your goal is to put Smugglers in the void so that you can know when to hold them for the Smugglers again. So, like one thing that I did in my match is I killed a Smuggler, and I'm like on my next turn, I'm like, wait, should I have went for like Mother of Skies instead? Because I don't want to put Smugglers in their void, because then they get them out of the void. And of course, Apple Chips then got the Smuggler out of the void and did Smuggler things that way. So there's some interesting plays there where, they're trying to put things in the void, so you have to sacrifice the better unit, not the worse unit. It's a really hard deck to play really well, and it's a really interesting deck.
Sure. All right, let's switch gears here. Let's switch gears here real quick. We can always come back to more deck lists in a minute, but let's switch gears here and let's talk about the metagame for a little bit. So the top 64 metagame that we saw going into today was 15 copies of Even Feln, 15 copies of this Menace Sacrifice deck. So that's an absurd number. I mean, 30 of the decks, half the decks in the field basically were either Even Feln or Menace Sac. Going down, we had 9 copies of Hurukira, 4 copies of Yetis, 3 Sling, 3 Elysian Spells, 3 kind of mid-range or other copies of Feln, and then 12 other one-off decks. So let's talk about this metagame real quick, especially the top 2 decks here. So my first question for both of you would be, one of these decks brought 15 to the top 64 and had basically, 2.5 to, 3 of the top 4, 2 in the finals. One of them had 1 in the top 8 maybe, and got smashed right off the bat. So what's the difference here? What do you see from that? What is your takeaway from these 2 decks at the top of the metagame coming into today?
I think it's in part. I don't think there's that much of a difference in power level between the 2 decks, honestly. I think in part there's obviously variance in a tournament, and there's also like matchup variance, right? Like a number of these FPS decks were mirrored in round 1, and so when you take a mirror, obviously one of them has to lose, right? So if you just take a mirror, then that puts out a number of them down, in the 64th slot in the mirror, and then in the top 32, if none of them just get lose a bit or whatever, that takes even more out, right? So I don't think that it's so heavily Even Feln's favor. I think FPS Shrine is on the same level.
Okay.
I think trying to say Boxer 1 that for the deck is the best deck in the format right now is not something you shouldn't be looking at tournaments that way, because they're one-off events, right? Your goal for looking at the best deck is on a broad scale, on a statistical level, right? And on a statistical level, both of them performed basically equally well in my books.
Okay. Sunny, your thoughts on either that or the rest of the top 64 metagame? You could touch on Kira as well. I know both of you played Kira today, but we didn't really see any copies going deep. I think Stormblessed, you had your 1 copy in the top 8, right? You went deep.
I went super deep.
You went deep.
Went deep. I just never was on camera. It can't be blamed for that.
That's fair. We did have 1 copy in the top 8 in your hands, but Sunny, what are your thoughts on the meta?
Yeah, I'm not really a believer in this Menace deck. I'll believe it when I see some good numbers, but to me, it's one of those decks that feels good and feels like you're about to win every game, but the reality is that there's some clunkiness, there's some inconsistency, and there's some inherent weakness in the strategy that can be hard to overcome. I mean,
well, about that, I have some numbers to lay on this welcoming crowd. So TBC has a scouting sheet. Obviously, we try to scout games and see what the metagame is looking like, and help other people. And then I also took parts of the FE scouting page because I wanted more data. And unfortunately, I didn't get as many as I'd like because not every TBC member scouted all their games, sadly. But I did get a sample size of about 190 decks, so 190 people. There was about 800 to 900 players total in the open, and so this is about 1/4, 28% of the share potentially. And of that, so of this representation, you see that Even Felon started at 15% of the metagame in day 1 and rocketed to 25%. and FPS Shrine started at 10% of the metagame day one and rocketed to 25% as well, roughly 25%. Kira and Yetis both did about the same. They converted the same ratio, right? Kira was about 15% on day one, 15% day two. Yetis about 6% day one, 6% day two. Same with Odd Feln or whatever. So really what it is that both Even Feln and FPS Shrine dramatically overperformed in converting to day two. They dramatically overperformed in how well the decks did. And FPS Shrine specifically did it the most. So I think the Menace deck is real. As far as number of players that played it day one compared to number of players who played it day two, it just overperformed.
Sounds like
All
a
right,
debate.
well,
Sounds like a debate to have on a
that's good
future
evidence.
podcast. Any more thoughts on the meta, Sonny? You get your 2 minutes. Any thoughts on the meta that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, any metagame that is flush with even decks is going to be exploitable. We've seen this over and over again with when it was even Elysian, decks that like flew over or like did touch a battle combo or something like that were able to capitalize. When Severin Reap was popular, decks that played Taylor's Intervention plus Grodov's Burden were able to capitalize. And I think that if the metagame representation is what it is for Even Feln going forward, then we're going to see some decks that work really well against it. Like, I think it's a really good deck in a vacuum, but I think it also has some glaring weaknesses in that it doesn't kill you very quickly and has a hard time dealing with relics, which is basically what we're saying to do in order to try to beat it.
Your deck didn't do well day one though. Xenon. Xenon showed up like 10% of the time and had no cop. Well, it had one copy in the top 64, and that was Splashing Grenahen.
Yeah, I was not recommending Xenon to people going into this tournament.
Absolutely. All right, before we go to our next topic, I'm going to let everyone we're going to recap. We're going to play a clip from the stream. We're going to play the very end of game 2 of the Boxer versus Colacoma, and we're going to let everybody be able to see that one and enjoy that one more time before we get on to our next topic. So if anyone missed this was game 2 of the Boxer versus Colacoma. The Boxer facing down an essentially unbeatable board with nothing really to do. So check out how this clip ends before we go on to our next topic. 8 points indeed. All right, for those of you who didn't get a chance to watch that one before, quite the play there by the Boxer, grabbing that Silverblade Menace out of the market, getting I would say Xaxes, but it was actually one more than Xaxes there to take that one and make it into their finals. So as we talked about, pretty good option to have for Silverblade Menace there in the market. What do you think of that, Sonny?
Yeah, I mean, I think it doesn't do anything except for the times where it wins you the game. So don't get it out of your market unless it's one of those times where it wins you the games. And that's probably frequent enough against, in a matchup where it's going late. It doesn't necessarily matter what deck you're playing up against. Maybe they have a lot of sites, so they're filling the void that way. Maybe you're against Colacoma and they've got a lot of cards in their void. But I mean, sometimes it's just going to win the game, and that's a pretty good thing to have access to if you can.
It's also good in the mirror, right? Because if you're playing the Felrock Wars, you just both voids are just stocked up by like everything because you're discarding Felrock to mill 6 and then mills another Felrock and then discards another 6 cards and then mills another Felrock and then discards another 6 cards and mills another Felrock and then suddenly everybody has Felrocks and then you just Silverblade Menace for lethal, presumably.
All right. Let's hit a couple of questions here, kind of high level questions. So I have a couple of these from Chad and a couple myself. So either one of you can take these. We'll switch off. First one. Well, we kind of already addressed the first one, which is how good is Sling? Is it legit? But we already talked about that one, so we'll skip that one. Second one. Is Grenahen busted? That's it. That's the question. Is Grenahen busted?
I'm gonna go with no at this point. I'm leaning towards no. Maybe it's Golem. Maybe Golem is the busted part, but I think with Grenahan, you do really have to warp your deck, right? Like even more so than Golem in some respects. You have to be playing, 36 to 40 hits for Grenahan. My opponent in the top 8 was playing only 32, which I think is wrong because I don't want an 80% chance to hit with Grenahan, because if you miss, it is just a 1-3 for 2 with lifesteal, and that doesn't feel good. So I kind of think you have to go for that. Try to hit that 40 if you can. Otherwise, lean towards that 36 and hope to get there a little bit. But I think
Yeah.
having to warp your deck to such an extent is makes it somewhat balanced.
Sonny?
Gato Sujos in chat says Golem is the busted card, but I mean, I think it's Felrock. How many even decks did we see?
Also, Felrock. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Hold on,
turn
hold on,
forward.
Stormblessed. It's Sonny's turn. Hold on.
Fine.
I
Oh
need
my
you
God,
on the air for FE cast in order to keep him away from my talking time. Yeah, so I mean, we saw. I guess all of the even decks were also playing Grenahan, right? But they were all playing Felrock, and just being able to play Honor of Claws, draw 3, and play a 5/2, and your opponent discards a card, all for 4 power. That's just incredible. I don't think that we're having an even-handed deck a format that has just one even-handed deck in Feln if we don't have Felrock. I think that's so at the risk of going on too long of a tangent, the big weakness of even decks oftentimes is their ability to deploy in a quick manner, right? All their cards are even, so that means that they have to eat a power here and there. Felrock lets you get by that. If you discard a Felrock, then you get to cheat on however much power you think Felrock is worth, maybe like 3 or so for a 5/2 that makes your opponent discard a card. And I think that's the really busto part of the deck, not even hand Golem, not Grenahan. And I know a lot of people are going to hate me for saying that, but that's where I think.
All right. Well, that actually
100% concur.
That actually
100% concur.
that tails into our follow-up question, which is any balance changes coming out of this tournament?
Felrock.
There are so many busted cards in Throne. I joke that
Also
in the Kira deck, it's like all cards that I never that I absolutely hate. I mean, the warp on Lord Styr's Tower is absolutely crushing, like soul crushing. Felrock, like Grenahan into Felrock, it's not. I'm fine with Grenahan. It's just that Felrock gets to be put into play for free. Is what really irks me. That's what comes to my mind.
I'm in the mood for some Felrocks being touched. I've sort of maintained that like Feln is bad, although this was pre Grenahan, so Feln obviously got a little better with Grenahan. Feln is bad, but Felrock is busted. The top 8 on turn 4, my opponent played Forbidden Research and discarded 2 Felrocks. So at fast speed for 4 power, they got a 7 for 1, which is pretty good, all things considered. I didn't actually warp any Styr's Towers this tournament, but Styr's Tower is really good. Styr's Tower is really good. Valkyrie Warp's a weird mechanic. I mean, everything is really powerful. Like Maveloth Huntress might be touched. Some cards from Kira might be touched, although I'm not sure about that. I don't know. I mean, Even Hand Golem maybe should get another touch up again. Although I kind of doubt Even Hand Golem will get touched up again, but maybe it is a lot of Felon in the top 64, even in general.
Somebody did analysis on the number of Maveloth Huntress. It was the most commonly played card in the top 64, and there was an analysis with like what the decks were that what am I trying to say? What the faction distribution was, and like its primal everything, because every deck's trying to play Maveloth Huntress, and I do think that that's a problem. Although I maintain that I would rather, like, if I could only nerf one, I would rather have Felrock nerfed than Maveloth Huntress, because while Huntress is a phenomenal card, it's also predictable in the outcome you get for the power investment, whereas that's not true for Felrock.
It's also more interactable in a lot of ways because you can kill the unit that's imbued on, or you can kill the Huntress itself. Being a unit is interactable. Played for free, being a free card, Maveloth Huntress still costs power, and Felrock, played for free, and then also has the summon ability of that only can be stopped by Face Aegis even. So
yeah, there are tools to deal with Huntress. For example, against control, it's not very good. The Defiance is always going to be fantastic against it. Defile also is going to be good. I guess Annihilate too. like fast removal for it. Granted, there's always a cost to holding up like 2 cost spells in order to deal with the Maybluff Huntress, but like
Yeah.
I don't know, it doesn't cheat so much the way that I feel some other cards do.
Sure. Well, speaking of warping a Lord Stairs tower, we've actually got another clip for you all. So this was actually it seems so long ago because these decks were not being played in the as much in the finals, but we're gonna go all the way back to round 1. We've got Phoenix versus Johan Grunt, and we've got a palace on one side, and we've got a Lord Stairs tower on 3. So about to ultimate on the next turn, but the power of warp here. Let's take a look at this clip real quick. So I'll cut that one short, but just talking about that clip real quick, Sunny. So that just shows the power of you were behind on board, you had the ability to ultimate, and just the power of warping it allowed Phoenix to turn that game around. It was incredible, just the power of the warp plus the upside of casting 2, and just seeing how that clip behind on board, behind on cards, was able to flip that into an advantage for them.
I'll tell you what, it feels so awful being on the other side of that, and you feel like such a lucky, uh, undeserving person when you're the one who's warping it, because you get the warp for free, and then you get 2 activations, which is often backbreaking because you can play the Styres Beckoning, and then you can also play the Curfew Enforcement in order to make it so that they can't attack the site. It's not good.
In that match, we saw the Curfew Enforcement basically shut down the Berserk because they had Sack the City coming up, but was able to basically completely negate that with the Curfew Enforcement, 2 Curfew Enforcements off of those 2 towers. And, you don't often, usually Sack the City is game over, but we were able to take that out. So pretty impressive there. All right. Speaking of Kira, let's take the question that's going to be not fun for the two of you. What happened to Kira? That was, the deck to beat in Throne coming into last week, and everybody knew about it. It doesn't seem like the Feln deck was specifically targeting Kira. Maybe it did by accident, but wasn't specifically targeting that. And only 9 copies in day 2, and Stormblessed only the 1 copy in top 8, obviously in the hands of a great player, and that's the only reason why. But why? What happened to Kira?
I'll tell you what, the Feln decks are much better than they were a week ago. With people were like running weird versions of even Feln that weren't as streamlined. And I think nowadays that is part of why I previously thought my Feln matchup was fantastic, and now I think it's about 50-50. But man, I would love to run back the top 64 of this tournament and get behind the wheel of the Kira deck. I would still love my chances. I don't know how you feel, Stormblessed, if you feel
Oh yeah, I thought going into the tournament that I had a very good chances, and again I said I just got Felrocked. I just got turn 4 Forbidden 1 game, turn 4 Grenahen discard Felrock in the second game, and that was just lights out from Felrock. So I mean, well, once the game goes long enough, even Felon has an advantage with just Sadidi is a great card in the matchup. I think I'd run back here. I think the deck was still well positioned, and if you think you have to be good at the matchup. Like example right there in that spot, I think that even if that tower wasn't warped, let's say that Akari in hand was just tower somehow, I think that you'd still play the second tower, override the road that you're about to get just to Curfew Enforcement to pop the shield on Kira so that you can Valkyrie Enforcer it, and also to Curfew Enforcer. Like you don't have to get the warp value. Like even if that value wasn't warp, even if you only got the 1 card off of it, I still think Tower was great there. I still think overriding Tower is great there. And that's sort of the hard lines you have to decide to make. You sometimes have to replace your site with another site. It's like, but you already have a site in play. It's like, well, yeah, but you can still replace it to play the card still. So I think that there's a lot of play in the deck, and it's harder to play than you think just because there's so much tricky nonsense to do.
Yep, absolutely. But it's so interesting. Both of you said that you would run back Kira again, given the chance.
Absolutely. Did you see my
Yeah.
game? Holy cow.
I mean, I would say did you see my game, but no one saw my games.
All right, all right. I'm gonna switch gears a little bit here. Let me in the meantime, let me 1 second. Let me explain it for those of you who are new, who aren't familiar with the stream. Want to introduce you. So real quick, this is Tuesday Night Eternal. So we run community challenge tournaments every week. Tuesdays and Fridays, so alternating one Tuesday, one Friday. We had one this past Friday. There was a pretty impressive winner this past Friday, or Sunyveil here. And then we've got another one coming up Tuesday. And the way that this is going to work is that there will be 12 challenges each week for the spring season. After those 12 challenges, the winners plus the highest placing finishers that did not win a trophy will compete in a 16-player invitational. That 16-player invitational will happen on Saturday, June 5th, and the winner of that 16-player invitational will get an invite to the 2021 Worlds, who we just saw Boxer get an invite today as well. And then we'll run that back again in the summertime and end in September with offering a second invite to Worlds. So if you're not familiar with it, or if you're not following the channel, definitely appreciate a follow, sub to it. We'll get some awesome tournament action for you coming up as well, and special guest hosts and everything coming up there. So thank you all for being here tonight, and definitely check out our Tuesday Night Eternal series coming up soon. All right, but next thing I wanted to do is switch gears. Stormblessed, I'll give you the mic again.
Can I say one thing?
Yep, absolutely.
If you're playing on Tuesday, I would strongly recommend either playing Terra or figuring out how to beat Terra, because that card's good in Expedition.
Yeah, we're gonna move into Expedition in a little bit, because after tonight, Throne is over for a little while, so we're definitely gonna talk Expedition in a few minutes, and I'll give Tara the time to shine there, Sonny. But before we switch gears into Expedition, I want to pull up another deck list. Stormblessed, I know you've been just itching to go off about this one. We've got probably the most exciting deck of the tournament tonight. We've got Popetito's 4-faction Eccentric Officer. What the heck is going on here, Stormblessed?
Popo is a brilliant individual. That's all I can say. 4-faction, this eccentric officer, just complete nonsense in the best of ways. Basically, this deck is doing one thing, but it's doing one thing really hard, and that is you play Transpose or you play Merchant, and you get Eccentric Officer out of your market. Then you play Eccentric Officer, and because the deck is playing 31 cost cards, you heard me right, 31 cost cards, you then play Crown Watch Press Gang, which can fetch up, hopefully, many cards in your deck, which include Scourge of Frostholm, Kairos, or Spirit of Resistance. Spirit of Resistance being for, normally it's 12 cost to Spirit of Resistance. Okay, let's start us off. Spirit of Resistance is a card you might not know about. The other two, you probably do. Spirit of Resistance, 12 cost, I believe it's a 10/10, and it says, summon, kill all other units and attachments. Problem is, it's just really expensive. But when you can tune up with Press Gang, play it, and then put Press Gang back into your deck to then be played. Also, 1-cost Press Gang can draw out another 1-cost Press Gang, because they all cost 1 now. So you just play Press Gang for Press Gang for Press Gang for Press Gang. And that's hilarious, loop. And then on the other side, the other plan is that you have Salvo as well as Transpose, because you're playing everything. And your secondary objective is that you then go back to the market with, your what is it called? The Rocano Smuggler, or Salvo, grab Reweave, and then Reweave out Scourge of Frostholm, or secondarily Spear of Resistance if needed. And if if you shift to Scourge of Frostholm, your opponent can't play spells. They can't silence it with a silence effect. It can't play spells. They can't Maveloft Puncher it. It is sticking around forever. So that deck is just doing a bunch of really wild things. And also, kind of in some sense, proves a lot of people wrong, including, I think, me and Sunny, who kind of thought Eccentric Officer was, completely unplayable meme. And I think it's better than a lot of people might be getting credit for, because Transpose plus Merchant gives it a lot of potential power. And turns out there's a lot of ways to tutor out cards once you have that, whether it's Crown Watch Press Gang, Dragon Forge, Realign the Stars. There's a lot of potential ways to tutor cards out of your deck that suddenly are super cheap and super powerful. And while Popo's power base, might be a little unrefined because of how few days he had to tune the deck, it's a wonderfully cool deck. Recommend trying out on ladder. There's a lot of cool potential innovation in the future. Maybe strategize to help put back cards you can't play on the bottom of your deck, improve the power base a little. I don't know. I think the archetype has a lot to go, and I'm looking forward to seeing where Eccentric Officer ends up in the future.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Stormblessed. Well, you heard that. If your takeaway from this tournament is not I want to play even Feln, well, here's one to play with. This will be a fun deck to mess around with on ladder, so definitely check that out. All right, before we head over into talking about Expedition, let's give you all one more clip. This one's more of a fun one. This was from the top 8 match of the Boxer versus RNG. And Sunny mentioned earlier how busted Felrock is. Well, take a watch of this clip. All right, that may have been one of the highlights of the tournament right there. That was pretty special. So if you see why Felrock is silly, there's a good example for you.
You stopped it before the A space.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh no, let's not show that A space. That was sad.
Yeah, that clip didn't include the A space, but yes, that was a moment too. All right, so that's, I think, anything else before we move on to Expedition? Anything else about Throne that you guys want to touch on?
I mean, I'll say about tournaments. One thing they don't tell you about tournaments about getting far is just how tiring it is. Like I got top 8, and I'm not the Boxer. I'm not as, I guess I'm not as tired or whatever. But like I'm still very worn out. Just that, like there's a lot of energy that goes into getting that far. Just having to play that long, think because you really have to play at your best, right? And that takes effort and energy. So it's a long day. You gotta eat food. You gotta drink water. Be well rested. Take it down.
I just hope that for the next Throne Open, Kira is well positioned and that I can run back because I just love playing Kira. But that's going to be 3 months from now, and who knows, a lot could change or not.
They'll give you another bubble shield.
All right, let's move on. So that was basically a Throne action. I know we've all been thinking about Throne. We've been practicing Throne. We've been watching Throne all day. That was a fantastic Open. It was really exciting to see some competitive Eternal action. But really, what's happening now is there's not a Throne Open for a while now, and the current week is Expedition for the Tuesday Night Eternal series as well. So, and as well as the next Open is Expedition. So I think quickly here, as soon as this event ends, we're actually shifting gears and focusing on Expedition now because the next major tournaments are all Expedition. So we had an Expedition challenge on Friday. So I've got your deck here. Spoiler alert for anyone who didn't pick up on my little subtlety there in chat. Sunyveil was the winner of the Friday challenge, the Expedition challenge, on this sweet Huru Soldiers deck that kind of dominated, including your new pet card, Tara Ever Loyal. So, Sunny, why don't you real quick talk about this deck, and then let's talk about Expedition as a whole and where things look going forward for everyone.
So, Tara is an incredibly powerful card, and what you're trying to do with this deck almost every game is go 1-drop, 2-drop Tara, and then Warcry, and then all of the rest of your units for the rest of the game are going to be huge. That does mean that you have to play some 1-drops and 2-drops that you would otherwise not want to. For example, Maybloff Elite, or maybe having the full 4 Crown Patroller. But, I mean, just the power of Tara cannot be denied. The other thing is that Dovid is very, very good in this deck, and I mean...
I think you could have just stopped at Dovid is very, very good.
The janitor cleans up house.
But it's even better in this deck because you have a ton of options for what you want to get, and a lot of your soldiers have Plunder, so you can even, clean up your hand with a Plunder effect. So, that's basically all there is to it, just trying to win on the back of the power level of those 2 cards. I was playing Bubble Shield in order to deal with Equalize because I think Equalize is showing up in a lot of the control decks. And yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the options here can be based on how you want to fit it in the metagame. But I think this is a pretty good level 0 deck or level 0 strategy, is playing Dovid and Terra in the same deck because those cards are a lot stronger than a lot of the other cards in the format.
There's sort of an interesting interaction between Terra and Dovid where you play Dovid and then play Terra on Dovid. You attack with Dovid, your opponent wants to block and trade, but they also suddenly don't want to block and trade.
Yeah, so I know Theo is asking a question in the chat, although I know he knows why. But for those who don't know why, we got a lot of questions on Friday, and there was some confusion over the market. You explained it in the post-winning interview, Sonny, but just real quick for those of you who didn't watch that or who may be in chat confused, what's with the time cards in the market?
So I was actually wrong. You can't play the time cards in the market. I was just copying the 3-faction version. You can get the time cards out of the market, but then you don't have any time influence in order to play them.
Gotcha.
So the real market should be invasive species and then like 4 factionless cards.
Okay.
So yeah.
Going forward,
Wasteland
that's a change
Broker to shuffle them back into your deck, Sonny?
All right,
Sonny,
we're
that
going to
EXP
give
stopped working.
we're gonna give a little credence to. We're not gonna talk about this one for too long because we saw this in Throne, obviously, but want to give a little credit to the runner-up as well. HeyYu, another very good player on the circuit, was the runner-up to Sunny there, falling to a pretty unfavorable matchup against that Soldiers deck that you brought, but pretty dominant through the rest of the tournament. So what was up with this Sling deck? We don't have to go through everything because we saw Sling and Throne, but it's making waves in Expedition as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're playing time for cards like Owlhead and Desert Alchemist in order to survive longer. I guess Hermit Gardener is a pretty good one.
Yeah.
But I think this is attacking the format from like completely different angle than mine is. It like identifies certain weaknesses in the format and does really good against the existing like Combray and Huru decks. But it just so happens to be really bad against the deck that I played. Mm-hmm. So I mean, if you're trying to beat Huru and Combray, they might not have great answers for Sling, and in which case, you know, exactly what we've said before is Sling plus a big unit can be something that decks struggle with.
Yeah, Sling's better in Expedition because the format's slower and the format power level is a little bit worse. So not only is not only do you have more time to find the Sling, but you also the big units you're playing are also slightly more resilient. They're slightly harder to kill. They can't just kill them for less. They have to spend a little bit more resources on them. So I'm still unsure about Sling and Exped, but it's much more promising there because the format is a little lower power format, obviously.
Okay, well, outside of those two decks, let's look at Expedition more at a macro level. So we've got a couple big Expedition tournaments coming up. As I mentioned, the Spring Challenge coming up on Tuesday, as well as the next Open coming up in a couple weeks. If you're going into the next couple weeks preparing for competitive tournaments, what should players be thinking about? What key cards should players be watching out for? What should they be testing? What are people looking at going into Expedition over the next couple weeks?
There's sort of three cards. There's sort of 3 cards that I think that you should be at the forefront of your thoughts right now. I think they should be Terra, I think that should be Grenahen, and I think that should be Crafty Occultist. The 3 new cards, especially because if you've been playing Exped for a while, not only are those 3 new really, really powerful cards added to the format, but they're also, again, new cards added to the format, right? So you might not be as used to them. Those are, me and Sunny both agree, are the 3 most powerful cards released in the new mini set and the new bundle. And they're really, really powerful in a lot of ways, right? Grenahen, you have to warp your deck around, but allows you to dig through your deck in a really speedy fashion, while even potentially enabling some discard outlets. Crafty Occultist, discarding 2 cards, drawing 2 cards, solid mid-range, solid in aggro, it's worse in Exped by a fair bit, I think, because of the loss of, say, like Zoes and Jotunhurlers, cards with Echo or Fate that have special unique effects like that. Like Jotunhurler itself lets you trigger both halves of Crafty Lad, and Crafty Lad then gets to be flying and make a special Grenadin friend. And so the fact that you can't do that in Exped makes it probably significantly worse. But you still have Krull, when to hold them. Dovid still exists, so there's still a lot of powerful things in Exped, and I think look at the new stuff, especially because if you thought FPS or whatever, if you thought the combination of Grenahen and Crafty Occultist maybe didn't have that much legs in Throne because of clunkiness, whatever, potentially it might have 1 or 2 or both might have legs in Exped, where the format is a little bit slower and a little bit lower power level.
I think a key thing, and I was surprised that you didn't mention Dovid along with the 3 new cards, although I agree that those 3 cards are very good. That one huge thing about Expedition is that the disparity in power level between the good cards and the not so good cards is tremendous. Like the difference between Tara and even Temple Shihan, which is my other 3-drop, which is not a bad card, but it's huge. The between Dovid and any other 2-drop that isn't Maveloth Huntress is huge. So, I mean, I think you just really need to be asking yourself, am I playing the strongest cards in this format, or do I have a really good reason not to? Because I think if you're not playing those cards, you better be really confident about your strategy, because otherwise, the card quality is just going to catch up to you.
Yeah, I really like the way you phrased that.
The thing about Dovin and Exped is that, at least from my recollection, it's obviously I've been focused on Throne a bit recently, but my recollection, it's been that removal does two things. It either kills Dovid or it doesn't kill Dovid. And if it kills Dovid, then it's not hitting a bunch of other cards, right? Like you look at the Soldiers deck, if your removal kills Dovid, it's probably not killing anything else. So Dovid's really awkward. Well, not awkward. Dovid's really well positioned that way, where it really taxes removal and makes you have to, decide what you're going to do with your removal and what removal lineup you're going to play in your deck.
Yeah, there's no Defile, which is huge, because that's like one of the most cost efficient ways. There's some kill spells that cost 4. There's Vanquish that kills Dovid. But I mean, those cards are really bad against those other cards that we mentioned, right?
True.
I guess they're fine against Tara, but like against Crafty Occultist, if you're paying 4 power for Death Strike against Crafty Occultist, good luck.
All right, just a couple more comments. We're going to wrap things up here in a minute, everyone, but a couple more questions here. So we've kind of touched on this, danced around it all night, but let's just talk real quick on Stormbreak. So made an impact. It might not be the same impact that Jaral and Kira made and that whole cycle made, but definitely made an impact, and it's been fun to see some of those new cards in the top 8. What are your thoughts on Stormbreak as a whole?
I mean, it made just as much impact as Jarl has. I mean, literally, look at it. The formats all fell and all Grenahan all the time. I think 30 decks are Grenahan. Yeah, for now, but like 30 out of 64 decks played Grenahan. I'm guessing. I know actually some Shrine decks did not play Grenahan because those were playing Rat Cage and Reactor Forge, and once you put those in your deck, then suddenly you had too few hits for Grenahan. So
Kolokoma went all the way to Splash for it. Kolokoma was playing Xenon, but then Splash for then.
Yeah, Xenon only primal card was Grenahan because it also fueled the graveyard for reanimation stuff, which I thought was really cool. I thought that was a really, really good addition to a Xenon deck, making it like powerful in a way that it couldn't be otherwise. Also because it digs for Even Hand Golem, for instance. I don't remember if it was playing Even. I think it was Even, right? It was Even.
It was, yeah.
Xenon Reanimator. So like it digs for Even Hand Golem. So I already forgot the question. I'm tired. Sorry, right. Sunny, you can take it from here.
Sunny.
Well, I mean, I think we both didn't realize the potential of Eccentric Officer. That's really creative deck building by Pocotito, and I think that with refining it has the potential to be something really scary. I don't know if it's always going to be fantastic, because certainly if you know you're playing against it, there's like surprise factor. You have no idea what your opponent's doing if they start playing by the first few cards of the deck. But like, I mean, that shows a lot of potential. That could be something that's really busted, and if you don't have an exploit at the right time, or whatever the case is, that could be really good. I just a note on Felm, like people were playing Felm decks before Stormbreak. Like even Felm was one of the top decks before that. So like, I mean, Grenahan made it better, yes, but I think that if Even Felm is specifically Even Felm with even-handed Golem that you want to dig for, I don't think that Grenahan has quite such a breakout. What I'm excited for is if people start playing like Kilo decks. I know Isomorphic played a Kilo deck. It looked like the influence was kind of tricky on it, but like that would be pretty cool, because boy, I don't know if you can play even Kilo with Grenahan, because it kilos into a 3-drop. Right. But like that's a great card for the deck. So that's pretty cool.
Cool. Overall, a success then. So we'll give Direwolf, if you're still in the chat, success on Stormbreak. Good job. Nice job, everyone. All right, last thing, just sort of a fun question finishing out. What's it feel like to have competitive Eternal back again?
Oh my God, it's so good. What can I say? I mean, okay, I think that competitive Eternal is in the best place it's ever been, and it's always been like in a good to great place. I just think that like with a couple seasons under everyone's belt, like the names are familiar. The people in the top. The top 16, the top 8, they're all people that if you've been around, these people, and they've been battling it for a long time, and people, know each other and talk with each other. And I think that the format is getting better with like the opens, the one Throne, Expedition, and Draft open, presumably for each set.
Yep.
And I don't know, it's like the way that you qualify for Worlds, and then the fact that we have Tuesday Night Eternal. I just think that competitive Eternal is the place to be.
I love the competitive Eternal. I love just the competitive nature. Everyone playing at their best. I get the shivers even day one. Just nervousness and excitement just courses through my veins, and I'm just like loving playing at my peak. My top 16 match with Apple Chips. Well, I guess there's recency bias, but is probably one of my favorite matches I've done. But it was really tight, and on both sides, just all the different plays being made in FPS versus Kira is just so interesting. And playing our peak. As Sunny said, now we have names and consistency, right? I think 4 Worlds players made it to the top 16, which is really cool, right? That shows a consistency level on the quality of players at Worlds, and also having the sort of story to tell based on Boxer winning as well, right? So it's like continuing the story. So there's a lot of coolness there, and I have a blast. T&E also, I think T&E does improve the gameplay experience too by providing sort of the FMM style environment, the sort of lower tier, not lower tier, but lower stakes. That's the word, lower stakes.
Yeah.
Environments that also can provide another different form of outlet for competition. And I'm super glad it's back, and I'm very happy to have made another top 64 and to done well, because this is the peak of fun in many ways, is just being at this level and playing at that level, and I love it.
Absolutely.
Well, one more thing, if I may. Also, we've got so many competitive Eternal has spawned so many cool side projects, like the Eternal History Project, and the multiple Eternal Fantasy Leagues, which I think are a lot of fun, and the Friends of Eternal Team League. I should also mention. Going into that
tell us about that.
Yeah, I forgot to congratulate the Boxer on it, because there was so much other stuff we were talking about, but it was okay. So Team Rankstar versus one of the misplay teams. It was down to the Boxer versus both Watchwolf and Kolokoma. Those two face each other in the bracket, so it was going to be the Boxer versus the winner of that match. And the Boxer had to beat Kolokoma and make it to the finals to tie. And then if the Boxer won, he would secure a victory for Team Rankstar, and that's exactly what happened. So we got to see the showdown. That was the last that determined the match, was between the Boxer and Kolokoma in that semifinals match.
Yeah, you gotta love when that happens. Asking in chat, is there a place where people can find info on the Fantasy League?
Yeah, I think there are multiple fantasy leagues, but the one that is run through Friends of Eternal is certainly open for anyone. You can find it in the Friends of Eternal Discord, or you can contact Stormguard798. Is that the right number?
Yep, it is.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Before we wrap up, a couple things real quick. We have the next Tuesday Night Eternal Challenge. That's coming up this Tuesday. Challenge number 4. That is Expedition format, March 30th. It will be at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Registration is open now. So all you have to do, if you have not played before, is go to battlefy.com/Tuesday Night Eternal. All you got to do, it's free to sign up. You just put in a deck list, show up, play 5 rounds of Swiss, and then a top 8, and that's it. And you could qualify for the Invitational and potentially qualify for Worlds. So definitely a blast. Everybody has a good time doing it. We have a good time covering it. So if you're not familiar with it, go ahead and sign up, or check out the stream on Tuesday night as well. Okay, before we head out, Sunny, Stormblessed, where can people find you? Pitch yourselves a little bit. What you got going on?
Well, if you like me and Stormblessed arguing against each other, you can check out FEcast, which is a podcast that we put out basically every week. It's focused on competitive play. It's a lot of analysis, talking with our friends, and we'll probably try to have the Boxer on this week, because he's a good friend of ours and someone that we've brought on several times. So if that interests you, check out FEcast. You can find it wherever you find podcasts. I also stream a little, but I would say check out the Friends of Eternal Discord. It's one of the best places to get better at Eternal, or stay connected to the competitive community. I'll put a link in chat right now for that.
I mean, it's kind of funny, because I basically second what Sunny says. I do the Friends of Eternal podcast on the FEcast, and FE Discord I think is a good place to be. I think it's a good community. And there's lots of good players here. We had, I believe, almost 40 of the top 64 are all participants in the FB Discord. And if you, somebody was mentioning recording your games and uploading them. If you record your games and upload them to, say, the Piloting Club channel on the Discord, you can get people commenting on your games. You have to be willing to accept the criticism or the comments, so don't take things any too harshly. But
That's how you become a better
there's
player.
all sorts of discussion going on, and I think the other place you can find me that's not those two places is sometimes you can catch me on T&E because I whenever Telemoko's offers, I like to show up again because I think casting's fun and being a part of the community is a great time. So also check out T&E.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate that. All right, that's all the time we got tonight. Thank you everyone for hanging out and joining us for the after show. Congratulations again to the Boxer on his huge win, and thank you so much to Sunyveil and Stormblessed for joining. Thank you for all the follows. I'm sorry that I didn't get a chance to name them all as you guys were coming in on that raid. Wanted to respect the Boxer's time, but thank you everyone for the follows. We really appreciate it, and catch us out Tuesday night. So we'll see everybody later. Thank you, Sunny. Thank you, Stormblessed, and thank all of you. We'll see you Tuesday. Have a great weekend, everyone.